Let's talk about something that affects pretty much everyone with a job, but it's usually buried in a bunch of financial jargon. I'm talking about how companies account for the benefits they promise you. Everything from your paid time off to a pension that might be decades away. Well, there's a complex rule book for all of that, and it dictates how those promises hit a company's finances today. So let's dive in and demystify it. To get right to the heart of it, let's just start with a simple question. Imagine your company promises you a pension. It's not going to pay out for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. It feels like a far-off future thing, right? But does that promise affect the company's financial health right now, this year? You bet it does. And figuring out how is the central puzzle we're going to solve. And the official rule book that tells us why is called International Accounting Standard 19, or just IAS 19. And its main goal is actually really powerful. It's not just about tracking cash going out the door. It forces a company to recognize two things right now. First, a liability because they've made a promise for the future. And second, an expense because you've already done the work. It literally pulls the financial impact of the future into the present day. So let's talk a little more about these future promises. The whole idea behind this standard is to solve that timing problem, to turn a future handshake deal into a cold hard number on today's financial statements. Here's the basic thinking. Every single day you go to work, you're providing a service, and in return, you're earning benefits. Well, IAS 19 says the second you've earned that benefit, boom, the company has an obligation. It's a liability. Even if they won't actually pay you for decades, your work today has created a debt that the company owes. Right? Of course, employee benefits is a huge catch-all term. So to make things a little more manageable, IAS 19 breaks it all down for us into 4 distinct flavors. First up, you've got your short-term benefits. These are the easy ones, like your salary, paid vacation, annual bonuses, stuff that gets paid out within a year. Then you have the big ones. Post-employment benefits. Think pensions or medical care after you retire. There are also other long-term benefits, like for long service awards. And finally, termination benefits, like severance pay. As you can see, it all comes down to the timing of when you get paid. And out of those 4, it's really the post-employment benefits that cause all the headaches and all the complexity. Why? Well, because you're trying to put a price tag on a promise that might not be paid out for another 50 years. That huge amount of time and all the uncertainty that comes with it just makes them incredibly tricky to account for. And all that complexity brings us to what is probably the single most important concept you need to know to understand pensions. The standard makes us ask one critical question: who is actually carrying the risk? And the answer to that question creates this great divide between 2 very different kinds of pension plans. So on one side, you have a defined contribution plan. The easiest way to think about this is like a savings account. Your company puts in a fixed amount, let's say 5% of your salary. What you get when you retire is whatever that account grows to. If the investments do well, great. If not, well, the risk is all on you, the employee. On the other side is a defined benefit plan. This isn't a savings account. This is a promise. Your company guarantees you a specific payout, say half your final salary for the rest of your life. If the investments tank, that's their problem. They have to find the money to make good on that promise. The risk is all on them. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The standard itself makes this distinction crystal clear. It all boils down to where 2 key risks land: actuarial risk and investment risk. Now, actuarial risk is just a fancy way of saying, what if our predictions are wrong? What if people live longer than we thought? And investment risk is pretty obvious. What if the pension fund's assets don't grow like we hoped? When the company is on the hook for those risks, like in a defined benefit plan, the accounting suddenly gets a whole lot more complicated. Okay, so because the company is shouldering all that risk in a defined benefit plan, they have to do some pretty heavy-duty calculations to figure out just how big their liability is. So let's break down exactly how they tackle that challenge. So how on earth does a company calculate this? Well, it's actually a pretty logical 4-step recipe. First, they have to estimate the total, ultimate cost of all the benefits they've promised. Second, they have to discount that huge future number back to figure out what it's worth in today's money. Third, they subtract the value of any assets they've already got stashed away in the pension fund. And what's left over, the final result, tells them if they have a shortfall, which is a deficit, or surplus.
Now that first step, estimating the cost, that relies on what are called actuarial assumptions. You can think of these as the company's best educated guesses about a whole bunch of things they can't possibly know for sure. Things like, how much will salaries go up over the next 30 years? How many people will quit before they retire? And the really big one, how long are our retirees actually going to live? It's basically fortune telling, but with a whole lot of math and expert analysis. And all of that intense work, all those assumptions, it all boils down to this one simple but incredibly powerful equation. You take the present value of the obligation, that's the cost of all your promises in today's money, then you subtract the fair value of the plan assets, that's the pot of money you've actually set aside. If the promises are bigger than the pot of money, you've got a deficit. And that deficit isn't just some number on a spreadsheet. It is a real liability that has to go on the company's balance sheet for everyone to see.
Okay, so we have waded through some pretty technical stuff. But why should you, or anyone who isn't an accountant, actually care about any of this? Well, because these numbers have huge real-world consequences. This is the so what part.
Let's start with a number. This is not some abstract accounting game. Pension deficits can be absolutely colossal. I mean, it is not at all uncommon for a big established company to have a multi-billion-dollar, or pound, or euro, hole in its balance sheet, all because of these pension promises. This is a massive, very real liability.
And a hole that big, it sends ripples everywhere. For starters, it directly hits a company's reported profits year after year. It's like this giant hidden debt that can spook investors and drag down a company's stock price. A huge deficit can also suck up cash that the company could have used to innovate or hire people or grow the business. But, most importantly, the health of that pension fund determines the financial security of thousands of people who are counting on that promise being kept in their retirement. So when you boil it all down, IAS 19 isn't just about accounting. It's about understanding risk. This standard shines a very bright light on the enormous promises that companies have made over the years. And frankly, given the risks we've just talked about, it's no surprise these guaranteed pensions are becoming a thing of the past. Which leaves all of us with a final and pretty urgent question. As these guaranteed promises disappear, who's going to bear the growing risks of retirement in the future, and how are we all going to manage it? Thanks for watching The Explainer.